Well, this is JC one more time. Now, as you know, I write and sing songs on my other channel, JC and Donna Lee, and also I have a few poems on there, but this is my basic poem channel. It's JCAM Poet, JACAMPOET. Anyhow, so this is where I do most of them. And somebody said, you know, when you're a poet, you have to appeal to everyone. You can't just write for one person, you have to write for everyone. Well, I do short stories too, which actually is what this is going to be, is a short story. So because I need to appeal to everyone, what I did was, I know a lot of people out there like country music and Willie Nelson, so I'm wearing my Willie Nelson headband. I hope it doesn't distract you too much. And then of course I have my Doctor Who shawl here that I have around my neck, and I think it goes all the way down to the floor back behind me. It's about 37 feet long or something like that. It's pretty long. And that was especially for Mirza from Sweden, because Mirza says it makes me looks like a Fransman. So also I wanted to dedicate this to Francois Robach, a friend, very dear friend of mine. And then I had, for those cowboys down in South Sweden, I had this bolo, little bolo tie thing here. I thought I'd put that on. And then, of course, for my little sweetheart, Tina, I have my Roy Orbison glasses on. And I have to explain, too, they look a little strange because I couldn't see without my regular glasses, so I put my regular reading glasses on, not the ones she likes, but the ones that I see better through. And then I put my Roy Orbison glasses on top of that. So with all this in mind, and of course I do have my regular blue poem reading sweatshirt on, so I hope that that appeals to everyone. It's everyone I can think of. Oh, and for any florists out there, I do have my poem reading flowers here. My to kind of dress this up a little bit. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead with this short story. Now, I don't know how interesting this is going to be. It's a short story. It's a true thing that happened to me when I was a child in Modesto, California, growing up, and you have to remember that it's from East Modesto, the airport district, which is known as Little Okie. This is where people came out, migrated to from Oklahoma and Texas, Arkansas, and back in there during the Depression days, and they came to California to look for a better life. And oddly enough, they all settled around the same place, so it's kind of like leaving one Little Okie place and coming to another one, but this one's in California. And so with this in mind, a lot of people were uneducated in those places, but I was fortunate. My mother was a hard-working lady, and she knew how to read and write, and as did my siblings, my sisters and my brother. So, and I even learned a little bit myself. So anyhow, with that in mind, I'm going to go into this story. Now, this story is, I call it, We Never Got Sick or Injured. It Wasn't Worth It, Ever. So with that in mind, I'm going to start it just the way I wrote it. And the telephone rang, and I answered the telephone. And I said, our daughter, Tracy, called a few minutes ago and wanted to know how to find something on the internet. I, of course, gave her the standard answer: type it into Google. It works for me. And that's what you do. Googling things is a lot like staying well was when I was a kid. Now, when you need to know something, you call on Google. You type it in, and in a half a second, you get 7,367,000 answers, and you can go through all of those answers and pick out the one that you like the most. Whether it's right or not doesn't matter. If you like it, then that is the proper answer. So anyhow, but when I was a kid, to stay well, my sisters and brother and I, under the strict supervision of our mother, took a pill called Calatab. And we also had a remedy called Black Draught. And then for colds, if we had colds, we mixed a little sugar in with a little kerosene, and we ate that, and that was supposed to cure our colds. And we used for skin places or small gashes or large gashes or anything else that bled a little bit or bled a lot or didn't quite bleed at all but hurt like the dickens. We used a little ointment called, or a little liquid called methylate. Okay, now we'll go back and we'll start. The Calatab was a small, round, slick pill. No one ever knew what was in it, and I still don't. I tried to look it up on Google here, and the only answer I got was my own blog back a ways when I talked about this very thing. It shouldn't have been hard to swallow. It doesn't seem like it because it was small, it was round, it was slick. It had a hard candy outer coating on it. But when you tried to gulp it down, it went as far as just the top of your throat, and it just stayed there all day. It wouldn't go on down. I've eaten as much as a whole loaf of Kilpatrick's bread trying to get it, trying to get the calatab to go down, but it never worked. I think it eventually just melted away. As a matter of fact, I think it was the first in history of the time-release pill, because the only way it was going to go away is it finally melted and it drained on down into your stomach and you were well, or at least with any luck you were well. Now black draught was even worse. Black draught was a flaky, grainy, but very fine powder form, and to do any good, it had to be taken into the mouth dry and washed down with water to do any good. It had to be taken into the mouth dry and washed down with a glass of water, but it was really hard to get down because it was so powdery, and it had a terrible taste to it. I remember how hard it was to get all the powder down. Sometimes I took up to 3 glasses of water to get it all down. It was really bad enough to gag a maggot, as the old saying goes, and I shouldn't say that. I won't say it because that's not a very nice thing to say, but it's true. I think I was only sick once or twice during my entire childhood. Anyhow, us kids learned at an early age not to catch colds. The best medicine for colds was sugar mixed in with a little kerosene. I remember wondering if I would blow up if I took that medicine while I stood too near the stove. And if I snuck around and smoked, I made sure it wasn't while using the outhouse after taking Mom's cold medicine. That would be pretty dangerous. Anyhow, I never took cuts or abrasions home either. I did for a while when I was very young and innocent, until I realized that methylate burned much worse than the skint place could ever hurt. Methylate was a red medicine in a little bitty brownish reddish bottle. It had a cap that's screwed onto the top, and attached to the underside of the cap was a glass applicator that went down into the bottle of this liquid fire, is what it was actually, is liquid fire. I'm sure the reason methylate was in such a small bottle, if there was too much in a bigger bottle, it would break out into flames and explode. I mean, it was that hot. This stuff was really hot. Okay, now this was once when I was swimming down to the river, down at the pipe. I've mentioned the pipe before. It was a place on the Tuolumne River where the road made a bend, and this pipe poured water out into the river, and it made it a little bit deeper there. It made nice to dive off this pipe. And I was swimming in the river down at the pipe. I cut my right knee to the bone on a broken beer bottle. It was out a ways where the water was shallower, and I was going along, kind of crawling along on my hands and knees in the sand, and my knee hit this broken beer bottle, and it really gashed it right down to the bone. I climbed out of the river, and I found a wad of paper, and I held it against my knee to try to stop the bleeding until I could get home, which was about a half a mile away. It still bled pretty good, and just as I came inside of my house, I remembered the methylate, and I immediately turned around to go back to the river and tough it out. As tough as you can be at age 10, which is what I was at that time. It was too late, though. My mother already saw me, and she started yelling, "Come here right now, James Cameron, come here right now." I was caught. I couldn't get away. It was too late. I reluctantly went into the house, and I showed Mom my slashed knee, and she said, "James Cameron, what have you done?" Well, I didn't answer because I knew it was pretty obvious what I'd done. Somehow I felt guilty for having had an accident. I should have been more careful and inspected the entire riverbed before going into the water. I don't know how I could have done it, but that would have been the proper thing to do. Anyhow, Mother got a clean dish towel and tore a strip off of it, and then got the methylate. Dish towels were the cleanest thing in the house, by the way, because when you washed and dried dishes, the dishes had to be clean. So if you needed a clean strip of cloth for a bandage, you got a dish towel. Pretty soon our dish towels were very narrow, and then we could just use the entire dish towel later as another bandage. Anyhow, I told her it was much better now, and it would probably be all right. But you know mothers, they think they know better about everything. Mom said, "James Cameron, I know better about that." And she set me down in the front yard on a peach crate, and she cleaned the gash, and no matter how much I whimpered, she applied the methylate liberally. I know the neighbors are still wondering what the ensuing loud scream was about. Maybe a mountain lion had wandered into the neighborhood and was calling his mate. It burned like fire, and Mother comforted me as she always did. She said, "James Cameron, now if you either shut that up or I'll give you something to yell about." Well, I figured I had enough to yell about already, so I shut up and I quietly waited for the fire to go out. Mom opined as to how maybe now I would think twice about going back to that river and maybe catching polio. Well, she was right. I did think twice, once on the peach crate and once on the way back to the river. There was another medicine a lot like methylate. It was called mercurochrome. I asked my mother once why we didn't use that, and she said it wouldn't do any good because it didn't burn. Go figure. It made sense to her. Thank you very much. This is JC.